I should have known something was terribly wrong the moment I heard Clara's muffled voice through the door that day. It started like any other Saturday morning. I was pottering around the kitchen, enjoying a rare moment of quiet solitude before the rest of the house stirred to life. The clinking of ceramic on the countertop as I prepared my usual morning tea was the only sound, until Clara's urgent whispers broke the stillness. At first, I thought maybe she was on the phone with a friend, keeping her voice hushed so as not to wake Ethan. But as I paused to listen, the harsh, conspiratorial tone set me on edge. There was no warmth, no laughter in her clipped words, just a forceful intensity that raised the hairs on the back of my neck. "Handled soon, before he gets suspicious," she hissed, her consonants sharp like icy needles. "Just make sure you're ready to move when I give the signal." My heart stammered in my chest as the implication of her words sank in like a stone to the pit of my stomach. She was plotting something deceitful, something aimed at hurting my Ethan. Of that, I had no doubt. In that moment, everything I thought I knew about my daughter-in-law, Clara, collapsed around me. Gone were the innocent smiles, the loving embraces she showered my only son with whenever I came to visit. Just one short, overheard conversation, and the woman I trusted with my family's happiness was suddenly a viper, poised to strike at our very hearts. How long had this malicious deceit been going on under my nose? What fresh hell was she concocting against my beloved boy, her own husband? 1,000 frantic thoughts whirled like a cyclone as fury and disbelief warred within me. I wanted to burst through that door right there and demand the truth, to grab Clara by her slender shoulders and shake it out of her until she spilled every last treacherous secret. But something held me back, a fleeting wisdom warning me not to expose my hand until I knew what game she was playing. For all my motherly instincts screamed at me to protect my child, I realized the smart play was to bide my time and lay in wait, to gather what evidence I could of her betrayal before raising the alarm, at least until I better understood the viper's nest I had unwittingly welcomed into my family. So I forced myself to retreat from that closed door, clutching the certainty of Clara's deception like a parcel of powdered glass. However sharp and wounding the truth, I knew it was the only way I could finally excise her lies from our lives for good. No matter what deep treachery she was spinning, I would not allow that deceitful snake to sink her fangs into my loved ones and inject her venom. If it was war Clara wanted, a war for the very soul of this family, then she just enlisted herself a determined enemy who would show no mercy in defending her kin. Our happy American dream of generations was suddenly hardening into a battlefield of looming familial crisis. But in that moment, I took a pained breath and soldiered on. For Ethan's sake, and for the sake of unraveling the dark truth before it ruined us all. I knew I needed concrete evidence of Clara's betrayal before confronting her. Over the next few days, I kept a close watch, paying attention to every hushed phone call and suspicious glance. The innocent facade she put on around Ethan only stoked my simmering fury. Finally, the break I was waiting for came when Clara left her laptop unattended in the living room one afternoon. A huge risk, considering what incriminating trails may be lurking in her digital footprints. I wasted no time seizing the opportunity to uncover the truth. With shaking hands, I lifted the laptop's lid, dreading what I might find, and that's when I saw it. The email correspondence laid bare like a ransacked tomb, her lurid sexts and explicit photos shared with not just one, but several men I didn't recognize. I felt physically ill, my stomach roiling as the full extent of her infidelity condensed into an inescapable reality. But even worse were the paper trails indicating her intentions to siphon money from Ethan's inheritance after taking out a secret life insurance policy. My hands went clammy, the laptop almost slipping from my grip. I couldn't process the malice, the sheer calculating greed she'd been operating with literally under our roof. This was so far beyond a simple tawdry affair. She was aiming to hollow out my son's life like a carved pumpkin and devour the leftover scraps. I don't know how long I sat there, tears of rage streaking down my cheeks as more and more damning evidence piled up on the screen. But eventually, the sound of the front door opening snapped me back to reality. I quickly closed the laptop, straightening myself up just as Clara emerged from the hallway. "Oh, good afternoon, Marlene," she chirped with that saccharine smile that turned my stomach. "Is everything okay?" I stared back at her, struggling to mask the disgust seething behind my eyes. She looked so unbearably smug, not an inkling of guilt over the depraved acts she'd been carrying out. In that moment, I wanted nothing more than to grab her by her pretty, lying mouth and, no, I couldn't give in to that impulse, as satisfying as it may be. Not without irrefutable proof to back me up when the inevitable denials came. Steadying my nerves, I forced the most level tone I could manage. "Clara, we need to talk about what I found on your computer just now." Her eyes went wide, those loathsome lips parting in a small O as the implication sank in. But just as quickly, her expression contorted into a sneer. "How dare you go through my private things, you nosy old bat," she spat, all hints of sweetness evaporating like mist. "What, did Ethan put you up to this, trying to pin something on me so you can cry victim?" I recoiled at her venom, appalled at how quickly she went on the attack. But that contemptible, transparent attempt at reversal only strengthened my resolve. I would not be cowed by this vicious succubus a moment longer. "Don't insult my intelligence with your lies, you faithless snake," I shot back, feeling the words ripping up from my gut. "I saw everything on there, the texts, the videos, the policy info. You're nothing but a calculating, money-grubbing whore trying to bleed my family dry." Her mask shattered then, giving way to an expression of pure, glowering hatred. This was the real Clara, the soulless harpy hiding beneath cheap cosmetics and vapid smiles. As she opened her mouth to surely spew more venom in her sad defense, I held up a hand to silence her. "Save your pathetic denials. We're done here, you and I. One way or another, I'm going to make sure Ethan sees your worthless soul for what it truly is. Your grip on this family is slipping, you treacherous snake, and I'll spend every last breath ensuring you slither back to the gutter you came from." With that vow lingering in the air like a prophecy, I turned on my heel and stormed out, leaving her to stew in the putrid mess of her own making. She'd been unmasked, her decade-long charade shattered beyond repair. From here on out, it was scorched earth. Or so, help me, Clara would rue the day she dared make an enemy of this mother's wrath. After my explosive showdown with Clara, I knew I needed to make my next moves very carefully. As much as I wanted to scream the truth from the rooftops and watch her world burn, a small voice of reason warned me to be strategic. I had the proof of her deceit, but would it be enough to convince Ethan? Sitting alone in my bedroom that night, the weight of it all felt crushing. How could I get through to my son, make him see the vile beast wearing his wife's skin? I didn't have the luxury of subjecting him to the graphic evidence. That venom could scar him forever. There had to be another way to peel back the scales from his eyes. That's when the phone rang, the caller ID displaying a name I wasn't expecting. "Derek, everything okay over there?" My brother-in-law's gruff voice crackled over the line. "You've been awfully quiet the last few days." In that moment, it was like the universe was presenting me with an ally, someone to help shoulder this burden. Fighting back tears, I quickly unloaded everything to Derek. The overheard conversation, the emails, the videos, all of Clara's sordid transgressions laid out. There was a long pause before he finally responded, rage simmering in his tone, that godless little harlot. We spent the next few hours strategizing, knowing we needed an airtight case to make Ethan a true believer. As much as it killed me, Derek warned that simply dumping the evidence on him could push Clara to retaliate, try to manipulate the narrative her way. We need to bait her into slipping up, get her nefarious plans on record, so that Snake has nowhere left to wiggle, he said, his words like arcs of electricity reigniting my dwindling resolve. With his help, I began meticulously documenting Clara's daily activities, taking screenshots of her shadier behavior and cataloging every incident that reeked of deception. We'd get that hellspawn to show her true ugly colors eventually, and by God, Ethan would bear witness. And we had an ally in a very unlikely place. Derek's own daughter, Lena, my sweet, mild-mannered niece. When I finally confided the truth to her, the blaze that erupted in her eyes was stunning, almost feral. "That backstabbing bitch has violated the sanctity of this family," she hissed, more venom than I'd ever heard from her gentle lips. "Count me in to help take her down. I won't let that whore get away with this." With Lena joining the cause, The chink in Clara's facade finally began to show ever so slightly. My niece took great delight in concocting subtle ways to shake that wretched harpy's confidence, keeping her always just a bit off-kilter and paranoid, knowing we lurked around the corner. Every sidelong glance, every bitten lip and shift of the eyes when we'd suddenly appear, felt like a delicious victory. Clara was the trapped rat for a change, her beady eyes darting around as the jaws of ruination began closing in. Just a bit longer, and she'd slip up spectacularly. Gone were any hesitations about ruthlessly exposing this schemer's depravity. With Derek and Lena by my side, I knew I had the family's full might aligned against Clara's sadistic machinations. For months, that godless vulture had been feeding on our love, our trust, but now the predator was about to become the prey. Whichever hole Clara thought she could slither out of this through, we would seal it shut, without mercy. Her despicable reign of betrayal was nearing its inevitable, fiery end. And as the splinter of loved ones committed to her demise, we would ensure the inferno that consumed her left no secrets remaining. With Derek and Lena fully committed to our cause, we knew the key was to bait Clara into revealing the full extent of her nefarious intentions. Simply confronting her again would only cause her to lash out with more denials and manipulations. No, this venomous serpent needed to be flushed completely into the open. Our best shot was to dangle something irresistible in front of her greedy snout, an opportunity she couldn't refuse to take advantage of and swindle from Ethan. Derek had the perfect scheme, one that made my stomach churn with guilt, but was ultimately necessary for the sting operation. We set up an investment plan, make it look incredibly lucrative. He explained in hushed tones over coffee one morning. Give Clara all the breadcrumbs to sniff out, passwords, financial details, everything she needs. You want us to tempt her? I shook my head slowly. Deceiving her is one thing, but concocting an entire fabrication feels like we're stooping to her level of moral bankruptcy? Lena interjected, eyes blazing with determination. That's exactly the point, Aunt Marlene. We can't play by the rules with someone as unscrupulous as that two-faced gutter rat. We lay the perfect trap to make her true nature inescapable. As much as it turned my stomach, I knew they were right. Clara had declared war on our family a long time ago. Our mutually assured destruction was the only path to excising her malignancy for good. Okay, I relented with a weary sigh. If this is what it takes to rid us of that toxic succubus, let's do it. What's the play? Over the next few weeks, we carefully constructed an airtight honeypot tailored to appeal precisely to Clara's insatiable greed and blatant disregard for ethics. A too-good-to-be-true investment vehicle with documents and financials readied, just waiting for her thieving tendrils to start slithering all over it. Derek and I played the parts of bumbling family members, feigning confusion over these perplexing investments as Clara's eyes gleamed with avarice. It made me want to vomit, watching her perfectly conceal the ravenous glee behind that vapid beauty queen smirk as the trap was set. You know, these financials seem complicated, Derek said one afternoon as we discussed the details over lunch. I really could use someone smarter with this kind of thing to take a look. Like piranha scenting blood in the water, Clara's whole demeanor shifted, her carefully practiced look of concern barely masking the predatory hunger in her dark eyes. Oh, Derek, you know I'm always happy to help out however I can with this sort of thing. She chirped in that saccharine lilt that made my molars grind. Why don't you pass those documents along and I'll take a look this evening? No pressure at all, but I'd hate to see an opportunity slip through the cracks. The dewy-eyed look of faux innocence she shot my way caused a flare of anger to surge through me. That forked tongue might as well be lashing out between her deceitful lips. But I bit back the venom welling up, forcing myself to play along. Are you sure, dear? I feel just awful piling more on your plate. Absolutely. Think nothing of it. The raptor gave a disarming chuckle, waving away my faux concern with perfectly manicured talons. It'll be my pleasure to lend my expertise. I'll go over each and every detail to make sure we don't miss a single lucrative window. I caught the briefest of looks between Lena and Derek, then a momentary flicker of disgust at the shameless deceit saturating Clara's every word. But we all remained steadfast, treading carefully as the viper began uncoiling itself around our tempting lure. Thank you so much, dear. I can always count on you to look out for this family's best interests, I said, forcing the most warm, grandmotherly tone I could muster as the muscles in my jaw clenched. Whether Clara believed the sincerity in my voice or not, she simply offered one of her plastic smiles in return, already lost in the first visions of her duplicitous plundering. Like capturing a venomous serpent, we held our breath, waiting for her to fully slither into the trap's confines. The first phase was complete. Now all that remained was springing it shut, sinking our fangs into the very heart of this deception before ripping Clara's facade to shreds once and for all. With Clara thoroughly ensnared by the bait we'd laid out, all that remained was to reel her in for the ultimate undoing. Anticipation coursed through me with every concealed glance I caught of her poring over the fabricated investment details. The arrogant smirk curling her lips told me everything. This was the moment she'd burn her last credible mask to ashes. The plan was for Lena to take the lead, playing the role of naive accomplice to draw Clara's full corruptive forces into the open. As the youngest of us, she could most easily appeal to that Black Widow's sense of overconfidence and make her slip up fatally. I just don't quite understand these prospectus forms, Lena said with perfectly feigned confusion one evening as Clara leaned over the documents. It all seems so complicated, definitely more than I'm equipped to handle. That was Derek's cue to make an overly theatrical show of heading out. Well, if you bright ladies have it covered, I'll leave you to it. Marlene and I actually have an appointment to get going to. Yes, we really must get moving, I added with a pointed look towards my traitorous daughter-in-law. You don't mind keeping an eye on things here for a while, do you, Clara dear? The she-devil looked up from the papers with a smile so calculated it could have been printer-generated. Of course, I'd be simply delighted to walk Lena through all the finer points. And with that, Derek and I made our exit, leaving the trap ready to be sprung. I had to hand it to my niece. Lena played the role of helpless ingenue flawlessly, as Clara huffed and puffed through lengthy explanations, deliciously unaware of the noose tightening around her with every word. Sequestered away and monitoring the audio-video feed, I fought to keep my fury in check as Clara's contemptuous mask slipped fully away. The condescending laughter, the flagrant insults about our collective intelligence. It was like she simply couldn't resist the urge to revel in her own smug superiority. I swear, you poor dear, it's a miracle you're not institutionalized with how little you understand, she gloated with an exaggerated roll of her eyes. Thank goodness you'll have me around to handle matters like these. Lord knows your idiot family would bungle it into bankruptcy before the first quarter's figures even hit. Lena recoiled with a perfectly delivered flinch, suckering Clara into brazenly continuing her torrent of bile. Seriously, why do you think I've stuck around playing dutiful wife to that dullard Ethan all these years? Certainly not for his rapturous skills in the bedroom, I can tell you that. Her derisive cackle pierced the airwaves, the sound of rancid nails on chalkboard scraping against my very soul. Mercifully, Lena allowed only the faintest look of shock to cross her features in response. Well, you always did seem to dote on him so supportively, she managed to stammer through expertly feigned distress. Does that mean you've been faking it all along? In an instant, Clara's expression went predatory, like a shark scenting chum in the water as she leaned in conspiratorially close. Fake it? She hissed with sneering contempt. Oh, honey, I've been meticulously planning this family's demise since before I even met that sad sack of a husband. With those damning words vocalized, the final hook was baited. I watched in speechless revulsion as Clara enthusiastically divulged every last lurid detail of her machinations, the ulterior motives behind their marriage, the mistress arrangements with her lovers, the insurance fraud schemes, and slow marination of Ethan's finances into her control. She held nothing back, so thoroughly convinced of her complete triumph over our pitiful family. I've been drip-feeding that simple-minded oaf his own cuckoldry for years now, she cackled with revolting glee. And once I finally gain dominion over his family's assets, I'll detonate the whole truth bomb right in his stupid face, just to watch it shatter him. He'll be left with nothing, no wife, no money, no pride. Just a broken, blubbering mess for me to grind my heels on one final time before exiting stage left as the big winner. As her malicious victory lap reached its crescendo of depravity, I heard a sudden clatter from the other room as Lena lost her composure, shoulders heaving with rage and heartbreak, even through her acting talents. The counterfeit empress clasped her hands in triumph, savoring every last shred of her perceived conquest with sadistic glee. Her very presence was a cancer metastasizing throughout my entire family. But now, we finally had every last diseased cell captured and ready for the eternal quarantine it so richly deserved. With Clara's damning confession secured, the final phase of our intricate sting was deployed. We arranged for a family gathering under the premise of Ethan's birthday celebration, one final ode to normalcy before ripping the veil away. As the hours ticked closer, my nerves reached a fever pitch, knowing this intersection could shatter relationships beyond repair. But Clara's overwhelming malice overshadowed any fear. She needed to be exposed, no matter how much anguish it caused. Evil this deeply rooted could not be allowed to fester any longer within our family. Seeing Ethan's bright smile as he embraced his venomous wife made me physically ill. How could he remain so blindingly oblivious to the viper coiled in his midst? It took everything I had to play the role of doting mother, feigning joy as gifts were exchanged and celebrations commenced. When the moment finally came, I exchanged a subtle nod with Derek and Lena. They moved to seal the exits as I stood, clearing my throat to gather the room's attention. Even Clara tilted her head inquisitively, that plastic smile straining at the corners as if she could somehow sense the trap about to spring shut. Before we continue with the festivities, there's an important matter we need to discuss, I began, unable to mask the tremor in my voice any longer. Something that can no longer be avoided or swept under the rug. The temperature in the room seemed to plummet as all eyes turned towards me, Ethan's expression becoming one of sudden concern. "Mom, is everything okay?" Through the swell of nausea, I focused every ounce of resolve on the woman beside him, the soulless, depraved harpy masquerading as his beloved wife. Clara tilted her head in faux curiosity, but I could see the faintest flicker of panic in those beady little eyes as their inevitability sank in. "No, Ethan, everything is not okay," I stated with cold finality. "For years now, your family has been suffering an infestation of lies and betrayal, and it's time that cancer was cut out for good." A hush draped over the room like a suffocating blanket as the implications slowly dawned on Clara. I caught Derek inching forward from the corner of my vision, boxing in his prey. "You see, your dear wife here hasn't been quite the faithful partner she's made herself out to be. In fact, that woman is nothing more than a manipulative liar and an accomplished con artist, one who's been actively cheating and orchestrating your personal, emotional, and financial ruin." The explosion was immediate, Clara bolting out of her chair with a strangled shriek of indignation. "How dare you make such vile, outrageous accusations?" She spat with turbocharged venom, whirling on my son. "Ethan, you can't possibly believe a word from these deranged liars. They're just bitter, jealous old harpies who can't stand to see us happy." But Ethan simply stared back in mute horror, his world crumbling beneath the weight of her visceral panic. When no denial or defense came from him, the terror in Clara's eyes reached a crescendo. Seizing the moment, Derek and Lena moved in with the laptop containing her recorded confessions, allowing the raw audio to blast through the room in high-definition clarity. Every despicable admission, every scheme to financially eviscerate Ethan and destroy this family's legacy poured forth in Clara's own gleefully narrated voice. As the look of realization congealed on my son's face, she switched tactics with desperate, grasping sobs. "Ethan, my love, you know I was just venting. Talking tough to make myself feel powerful in the face of adversity. You understand, don't you?" But even through her crocodile tears, the monster's fangs dripped with poison. With a contemptuous scoff, she redoubled her efforts at manipulation through attack. "This is all just one big, pathetic setup orchestrated by your shriveled old mother to turn you against me. She's bitter and alone, so she wants us to be as miserable as her, and—" The deafening crack of Ethan's palm across her cheek mercifully cut off her bile, leaving her lips sputtering and eyes bulging in shock. Clara raised a trembling hand to her reddened cheek as my son looked on her with a gaze of molten disgust. "Get out!" The words fell like grave weights from his lips. But Ethan, my love, please, you can't mean—" "I said get out!" he roared with animalistic fury. "I'm alive purely because of these people, my family. But all you've done is try to defile that family with your greed and lies. You don't belong here among us anymore. You are alone now." I watched in stunned silence, my heart in splinters, as Clara's entire world collapsed around her like a grotesque imitation of a human being. Weeping and wailing her refusals, she was pulled bodily from our home, cut loose from the family's fabric like the gangrenous growth she was. And as the door slammed behind her sorry form, I finally had a chance to breathe again. The serpent had been severed from our brood, her venom finally defanged for good. In the aftermath of Clara's cataclysmic unmasking, the silence that blanketed our home was deafening. Like the uneasy calm after a tornado's passing, we were left to take stock of the upheaval and devastation left in its wake. Ethan retreated into a shell of mute shock and betrayal, unable to even look me in the eye. I couldn't begin to fathom the vortex of emotions swirling within him, the anguish of being so systematically deceived by the person he trusted most, the humiliation of being played for a fool, the rage at her depravity. Just watching his hollow stare was like bearing witness to a light slowly snuffing out. For several days he remained that way, a ghost drifting through these halls he once called home. Derek and Lena attempted to reach out to remind him he wasn't alone in his grief and anger, but the walls he'd erected to protect what fragments remained of his heart were impenetrable. For my part, I didn't dare force consolation on him too soon. As his mother, I understood this was a wound that would need time and space to begin healing properly. So I kept vigil, lingering nearby to let him know I was present, but never imposing. Just existing as a bastion of familial solidarity should he decide to lash out or crumble completely. Then, almost a week after that explosive confrontation, the other ongoing saga decided to rear its head once more. "Mrs. Harper?" The smarmy lilt of Clara's overpriced lawyer wormed its way through the phone line. "We need to discuss your client's grievous and libelous actions against my client. She's suffered great personal and professional humiliation at the hands of your slander, and we fully intend to pursue legal recourse." I rolled my eyes so hard I thought they might detach and go clattering across the kitchen floor. Even disgraced and excommunicated, that vile succubus still thought she could slither her way back through intimidation. "Save your posturing, you third-rate ambulance chaser," I sneered with more venom than I expected. "Your client is nothing more than a deceitful con artist who engaged in criminal fraud and infidelity against my family, all of which we have ample evidence to prove in court, I might add." There was a momentary pause as I allowed that truth to soak in. I could practically hear the hamster wheels spinning in the little weasel's mind. "Libel is still a very serious matter, Mrs. Harper," came the inevitable rebuttal in a tone much less assured. "My client will not take this lying down." "Then I warmly encourage her to pursue this case and fulfill her martyr complex," I interrupted, balling my free hand into a fist so tight I could feel the nails cutting crescents into my palm. "Because I can guarantee you the fallout of that deposition. The evidence will enter, the witness testimonies will compel, the sordid details that will be dragged out into the light of public record will reduce any remaining shreds of her credibility and reputation to ashes, unless she has a hankering for ending up completely destitute financially and socially." Whether it was the steel behind my words or the stark truth ringing in that miserable shyster's ears, the sputtering stopped abruptly. For a blessed few moments, there was only the delectable sound of their case's prospects crumbling to dust. "We'll be in touch," came the meek rejoinder before the line went dead. I let out a long, pent-up breath as the call disconnected. Just another toothless strike from a soon-to-be defunct adversary, forced to slink back into whatever rancid den she crawled out of. Still, it felt cathartic to be the one keeping the snakes at bay for once, the lioness fiercely guarding her bloodied pride's sanctuary. From the hallway behind me, I suddenly became aware of Ethan's presence hovering. Had he been there long, watching the display? I turned slowly to find him fixated on me with an indecipherable gaze. "You weren't kidding," he said, his voice sounding almost childlike with disbelief. "When you said she was toxic and manipulative, when you vowed to cut that cord completely, you meant every single word." I opened my mouth to reply, but the words never came. Seeing the rawness carving canyons across his face, my throat grew inexplicably tight. Before I could regain my bearings, Ethan had crossed the distance between us and pulled me into a stranglingly fierce embrace. "Thank you," he rasped, as I felt hot tears spilling down the back of my neck. "Thank you for not giving up on me, on us. You never stopped fighting for this family, and I'll never forget that as long as I live." Heaving sobs racked my own body as I hugged him back with equal desperation, my lips murmuring every soothing reassurance a mother could muster between gasps for air. United in our grief and deliverance, the broken shards of our trust began reshaping into something resilient, something resolved to never be betrayed again. We would savor this moment for however long it was needed, to be fully bathed in the absence of Clara's venom. Then, when the last drops were expelled, we could finally begin putting the pieces of our lives back together. The weeks following Clara's excision from our family were a hectic whirlwind. Between fielding the occasional toothless legal threat and orchestrating Ethan's divorce proceedings, there was little respite from the lingering drama she insisted on fomenting. But with Derek and Lena steadfastly by my side, we weathered each pathetic gambit and postured maneuver from that miserable snake, united as a bastion against her final, desperate tantrum throes. Through it all, I made a concerted effort to keep extending the same patience and understanding to Ethan that he had afforded me in the aftermath of my beloved Teddy's passing all those years ago. The grieving process after being so insidiously violated can feel interminable, the wounds reopening with every triggered memory or habitual reminder. There were times the waves of anger, sorrow, and sheer disillusionment threatened to drown him completely. I'd find him sitting in the dark, clutching old photographs or staring blankly ahead as the reality of his defilement washed over him anew. In those fragile moments, I'd simply hold his hand and softly reassure him it was okay to feel utterly destroyed for a while. No words could anesthetize the all-consuming anguish. It had to be fully experienced, cauterized with time until the flames of betrayal burned down to embers. I'd been through similar depths before in the wake of Teddy's death and could impart that hard-earned wisdom. It was the only torch to light Ethan's path back from the abyss. As the proceedings wrapped up and Clara was expunged from his life for good, I could sense my son's scarred spirit beginning to slowly mend. The once hollow gaze regained tiny flickers of life and resilience. Each day saw him engage more fully with the world, rediscovering those simple joys and passions that she had systematically leached away. It wasn't an easy journey by any stretch, and there were certainly setbacks and backslides along the way. Forgiveness would prove the longest hurdle, both for Clara's unforgivable sins and his own self-pardoning for being so blasely blind to them. But we pressed on as a united front, applying familial love and understanding as healing salves whenever the old wounds began to fester. Then, a little over a year after that awful night of deliverance, I caught a glimpse of the light finally piercing through the storm clouds. Derek, Lena, and I had come over to Ethan's place for a small family dinner, our presence no longer stiflingly overbearing. As we sat around the table chatting over heaping plates, my son suddenly raised his glass in our direction. Can I just take a moment to propose a toast?" His voice sounded stronger, more assured than it had in months. "To the 3 people who saved my life in more ways than I can properly articulate." He turned to Derek first, offering a respectful nod. "You were the strategist, the voice of cold, pragmatic reason when my whole world was crumbling. If not for your insights and careful planning, I might still be trapped under that vile woman's control, wasting away in oblivion." Derek accepted the praise with a humble dip of his head. Ethan's gaze then fell on Lena, shining with unmistakable reverence. "You were our secret weapon, the warrior princess who stared true evil right in the face without flinching. I'll never forget your bravery, your commitment to defending me, defending all of us, from that. He trailed off with a pained look before recovering, his features hardening. That a succubus like Clara was even allowed to smear her darkness across our family is a sin I'll spend lifetimes atoning for. But you were the light that cut through and banished her for good." Lena flushed under the weight of such admiration, flashing a reassuring smile. Finally, Ethan's eyes found their way to me, shimmering with a soulful depth that instantly reopened the cracks in my heart all over again. "And Mom, what can I possibly say to the one person who never stopped believing I was worth saving, even when the evil had corroded me down to my foundations?" I felt my throat grow thick as he reached across the table to grasp my hands in his calloused grip. "You fought for me, you clawed me back from the abyss of her manipulations with every last ounce of motherly fury. When everyone else had been so utterly deceived, you alone could still see my essence worth cherishing underneath all the toxicity. I'll never be able to properly repay that unwavering love and perseverance." Tears streamed freely down both our cheeks as mother and son embraced, allowing the roiling tsunami of love and regret, of deliverance and resilience, to crash over us in waves once more. In that moment, the last vestiges of Clara's blight were finally washed away by the restorative power of family. When we eventually pulled apart with weary smiles, I could see the man I had fought so fiercely to protect, shining through my son's eyes once more. Hardened by betrayal yet edified in spirit, ready to joyfully rejoin the world and have a fresh reckoning for the depravities lurking amidst the light. As the conversation resumed with laughter and fresh resilience, I caught Ethan watching me with a contented expression. A lifetime of adoration and hard-won wisdom passed between our shared gaze, the reconnected heartbeat of this clan united against any evil that dared to encroach. We were battered, slightly broken, but burning ever brighter, thanks to the cauterizing flames of last year's purgative inferno. Our family's sanctity had been violated in the worst way, but in the end, the sanctity emerged stronger through trial by fire. There was beauty in that resilience, that unyielding defiance against the darkness. And with it came a resolute sense of purpose moving forward, to fiercely protect the bonds of this family, this home, from ever being tainted or torn asunder again.
I took the tough choice to depart and declared that I would not be returning. I clenched my possessions and shed a few tears, which mixed with my physical pain in my neck. My stay at my in-laws' house came to an end at this point. I'm 37 years old, and my name is Jessica. It had been 4 years since my marriage. I was a home-based writer before I got married. My father's accident forced me to return home to help my parents, which is when I decided to change careers. I eventually achieved great success as a freelancer, earning more money than I did at my prior typical work. I reconnected with Larry during a college reunion, and he ended up being my husband. There was a clear attraction between us despite our different personalities, and we got married shortly after. Sadly, Larry's father passed away not long after our wedding. We moved in with his bereaved mother in order to help her, a decision that from the start created the conditions for a difficult coexistence. My mother-in-law and I had a challenging life together. She never came to accept me as Larry's wife, even though I tried to be encouraging and fit in. I started to become tired of her insults and nasty remarks. Even so, I remained strong and unwavering, firmly deciding to leave and look for a better life for myself when it got too much. My mother-in-law Helen questioned the quality of the ingredients one evening while I was cooking dinner. "Was that store where you purchased these? With such ingredients, how can you make a nice meal?" she mocked. "Actually, these were from the upscale grocery nearby." "Helen, I apologize if this isn't to your liking. It's really a basic salad. I usually make it, and Larry like it." Trying to keep the peace, I said, "Yes, it's a bit pricey." "Oh my God. Behave in a way that doesn't degrade our family." Her disappointment was evident as she sighed. "You never know who's watching." Her remarks hurt, but they also gave me more motivation to become more well-groomed and competent in the kitchen in order to win her approval. I tried every day, but her icy stare never warmed up. Her harsh remarks and sarcasm were dismissed at first, but eventually they weighed heavily on me, leaving me feeling helpless and invalidated. I wanted to tell Larry everything, but our bond had changed. These days, we hardly ever spent time together. With a worn-out expression, Larry would reply, "I've been busy with work lately." I was getting more and more alone, so I eventually found the guts to tell him what was bothering me. One day I said, "Hey, I have something to discuss." Larry chimed in, "Oh, I actually have something to tell you too. My employment ended 4 months ago." "How come? Give up? What are you trying to say?" I let out a startled gasp. "I've already started another job, so don't worry." "Do you recall the boutique I've always wanted to open?" At last, I gave it a try. He disclosed, "I'm co-managing it with Senior Samuel," alluding to a well-liked member of our university who is well known for his charisma and leadership. He created and successfully marketed a gaming app while in college, and to demonstrate his abilities, he and his pals eventually founded a firm. He continued, "I didn't want to worry you or Mom," in his customary kind manner, but with a trace of remorse in his eyes. "I'm going to put forth more effort now. Will you be there for me?" I was touched by what he said, but I was a little hesitant to answer. "I'll support you, but about the rent for this house. Can you cover all of it?" I inquired. With a sincere gaze, he begged me, saying, "Please, Jessica, this has always been my dream. This is taking longer than anticipated to pay off. I want to spend more money on advertising because of this. Before we depart, I'll make sure this business gets back on track. To do that, I need your assistance." His genuineness and enthusiasm moved me, and I was unable to say no. Thankfully, we had some money, so I could pay the rent with my salary. More significantly, I shared and understood his passion and aspirations, and I had never forgotten the day I decided to marry him. If that's what you say, I get it. But only till this rental's lease expires. I concurred, adding, "I'd like to learn more about the store you're running." Naturally. Larry thanked me and showed me his exclusive shop's website. Its allure captivated me, so I inquired if there was anything I could do to help. "I ask that you concentrate on your work and that you keep this a secret from my mother." He said, "I don't want to worry her." This new discovery made me completely forget about my mother-in-law. Although I was happy to help Larry with his business, the monthly costs I had to pay for were going up. All of the household budget management, financial support for my husband, and even my mother-in-law's allowance fell under my purview. All I could hope was that the lease would expire soon. "Jessica, would you mind taking a little break from working on your computer to clean?" One day, my mother-in-law told me, "You should be more proactive with the household chores since you're staying here." "Oh, Mother, I apologize." I quickly replied, "I'll start as soon as I finish this job." "You have this task to do. I have enough justifications. Finish it as soon as possible. This afternoon we have company coming over. Please leave the house after you're done cleaning," she said. Over time, my mother-in-law and I continued to have the same connection. I constantly had to leave the house after cleaning when she had guests, and it seemed to annoy her. One little comfort was that I could work from any place with my laptop, but one day, things turned out differently. Upon my return home in the evening, my mother-in-law gave me a satisfied, "Welcome back. I cleaned your room." I hurried to my office, confused. Yes, the room was tidy. A big suitcase and 2 duffel bags were arranged neatly in the center of the space. Perplexed, I questioned my mother-in-law. "Mother, what does this mean?" "Originally, this chamber was ready for visitors. I can't stand it if someone uses it with your disrespect for cleaning. You will be required to pay a charge in order to remain here. If that isn't to your liking, you can depart right away." She firmly said, "Don't expect to live here in luxury without contributing." I bit back my words, feeling a mix of hurt and indignation. As I lowered my head, Trying to hide my upset, she added with a tone of finality, "I must say, I don't see you as Larry's rightful wife." With that, she turned and left for the living room. Tears of frustration welled up as I felt isolated and wronged. I tried calling Larry, but he didn't answer. After sending him a message about the situation, his reply came, "Please bear with it a little longer." When Larry came home late that night, I couldn't hold back any longer. "I'm already covering the full rent, and now she expects me to pay extra just to use a room. Her demands are unreasonable," I vented. Larry looked troubled and immediately tried to soothe the situation. "I'm sorry. I'll talk to her. Once we leave this place, you won't have to deal with her again. Just hold on a bit longer," he pleaded. His words calmed me slightly, offering a glimmer of hope. The next morning, it seemed Larry had spoken to his mother. We had breakfast together in an unusually quiet atmosphere, without her typical sarcastic remarks. Since my room had been cleared, I decided to work from the dining table. Mid-morning, my mother-in-law approached unexpectedly. "Are you leaving today?" she inquired. Before I could respond, I felt a sudden sharp pain in my neck. "Ouch, that's hot," I exclaimed, turning to see her smirking with a hair iron in hand. "Why would you do this?" I managed to ask, clutching my neck, bewildered and in pain. "It's time you felt some heat, too," she sneered. "I wanted to test how thick-skinned you are. You live such a luxurious life, yet you contribute nothing." "I work hard, too," I protested, my voice filled with disbelief and anger. "Why would you do something so cruel?" she scoffed. "You call your at-home job work? You're just using it as an excuse to laze around, nothing more." Her words stung as I hurried to the kitchen for a cooling pack, the pain in my neck a harsh reminder of the growing rift between us. Overwhelmed by the unfairness of it all, I couldn't help but glare at my mother-in-law. "What's with that look? The look of a pitiful person," she scoffed. "I've reached my limit. Leave this house immediately, or I can't be responsible for what happens next." "Am I free to leave?" I questioned, my voice shaky with the weight of the decision. "I won't come back, you know." "Yes, that's fine. I'm fed up with supporting someone like you," she retorted, her words dripping with disdain and disappointment. Overcome with a whirlwind of emotions, I began to cry as I packed my things. Fortunately, since my mother-in-law had already organized my belongings the day before, the process was quick. I left my in-laws' home without a backward glance and, after a brief visit to the hospital, found solace at my favorite cafe. The spacious tables and tranquil atmosphere provided the perfect setting to focus and gather my thoughts. As I debated whether to contact Larry, I was unexpectedly greeted. "Jessica, is that you?" To my surprise, it was Senior Samuel. "It's been a while. How's Larry doing? I heard you were the co-owner of his shop," he remarked. Caught off guard, I apologized for not greeting him earlier. "I only helped with the website design at Larry's request," I explained. Senior Samuel looked puzzled. "Co-owner? What do you mean?" "I just heard you were the main sponsor," he said. I was taken aback by his words. Larry had lied. This revelation hit me hard. It turned out that Larry had rented a different apartment and had been making an effort during the initial months, a detail he hadn't shared with me. Despite Larry's involvement in the online shop, others were handling the inventory, shipping, and promotion from the outset. Against Senior Samuel's advice, who suggested he take a more hands-on approach, Larry maintained that such tasks weren't suitable for a businessman. Consequently, there was no growth in foot traffic or sales, just a continual rise in expenses. According to Senior Samuel, Larry was now deeply engrossed in the internet business, spending lavishly on consultants and portraying himself as a successful business owner, while sometimes treating his employees poorly. I was stunned by these revelations. The added strain of covering my mother-in-law's expenses stemmed from the depletion of my father-in-law's inheritance, a fact unknown to me until now. Larry's recent pleas for financial help were likely a result of dwindling funds, something he had concealed from me. Connecting the dots with Senior Samuel's insights, the picture became painfully clear. After thanking Senior Samuel, I left the cafe and found myself at my parents' doorstep. Luggage in tow, my father greeted me with a surprised look. Overwhelmed, tears streamed down my face as I faced my parents, who had been unaware of my struggles. "Tell us what happened. Your mom and I are always here for you," my father assured me. Encouraged by their support, I broke down and shared everything. The harsh treatment from my mother-in-law, the financial burdens I carried for the in-laws' household, and the revelations about Larry. Both of my parents were deeply moved and shared in my tears. "There's no need to return to your in-laws. Live for yourself from now on," my father declared, his words echoing with sincerity. That conversation lifted a tremendous weight off my shoulders. What had I been enduring all these months? The only word from Larry was a brief message asking, "Where are you now?" After ignoring several similar inquiries, his attempts to reach out ceased. It seemed my presence in his life was inconsequential, but in that moment of realization, more than sadness, I felt a decisive clarity. Enjoying a simple meal with my parents, I experienced the genuine warmth of family, a stark contrast to what I'd endured. While staying at my parents' house, I began to rediscover myself. About 3 weeks later, Larry called, likely because the rent was due. "Jessica, where are you? Have things calmed down with Mom? She feels bad about it. Aren't you coming back soon?" he asked. "I'm at my parents' house now and I plan to stay here. Your mother said she's tired of taking care of someone like I," replied calmly, determined to forge a new path for myself, free from the burdens of my previous life. Firm in my decision, I told Larry, "I think we should get a divorce." His response was immediate. "Wait, why divorce? If living with Mom is the problem, we can sort it out. I'm coming to pick you up so we can discuss this in person." "Why should we talk now when you were unreachable before? How's your business going?" I asked. There was a pause before he replied. "Actually, I'm consulting with a business expert. There might be a big breakthrough next month." "That's beside the point," I countered. "You haven't shared anything substantial with me, and that's why I don't want to talk anymore. I'll draft the divorce papers and send them to you." I ended the call and hung up. However, that night, Larry unexpectedly showed up at my parents' house. I spoke to him through a small gap in the door, kept secure by the chain. "Jessica, please don't be upset. Let's return home. Mom regrets what happened," he pleaded. "I was forced out by your mother," I reminded him sternly. "You expect me not to take that seriously? She burned me with a hot hair iron. I don't know what she might do next. There's no way I can go back." I showed him the burn mark on my neck. "Did Mom do that?" "I'm so sorry, I didn't know. She told me it was just a minor argument," Larry apologized. "A minor argument?" His trivialization of the incident fueled my anger further. I had intended to discuss the divorce calmly, but his dismissiveness made it clear that a calm discussion might not be possible. "I'm not coming back. You should go home too. I'll contact you again tomorrow." "Really? Will you call?" I asked. "I can't accept a divorce without a proper discussion. If you don't call, I'll be back tomorrow," Larry said before leaving. Determined to address the situation formally, I arranged a meeting with Larry and my mother-in-law 5 days later at a chic restaurant located on the 25th floor of a luxury hotel. On the day, I chose to wear a high-end brand dress, styling my hair up to expose the burn on my neck visibly. My mother-in-law seemed displeased by my appearance. "Thank you for gathering today," I began, managing a polite smile as I addressed them. "I've reserved afternoon tea, so please enjoy it." Larry appeared somewhat relieved by my composed demeanor. As tea and small appetizers were served, my mother-in-law broke the silence. "Jessica, I'm truly sorry about last time. I was wrong," she admitted, her tone contrite. Larry had reprimanded her severely. "You'll forgive me, won't you?" she pleaded. I didn't respond immediately, choosing instead to quietly continue enjoying my appetizer, pondering the sincerity of her apology and the next steps in our complicated relationship. I slowly turned my neck to display the burn scar. I can forgive, but not until this scar fades. Also, are you aware that Larry quit his job? Larry became noticeably anxious at the disclosure, and my mother-in-law gave him a shocked look. "You mean he gave up? He's been saying he's busy all the time," she stumbled, sounding both confused and alarmed. Trying to maintain a neutral tone, I said, "Yes, he's busy pretending to be a successful businessman." "What's going on, Larry?" "Describe yourself." My mother-in-law's earlier fear turned to urgency as she demanded answers. With a sense of bittersweet vindication, I saw the scene come to pass. As I took in the stunning view from the 25th floor cafe, which appeared to reflect the high drama taking place at our table, the server brought over a tea station filled with alluring pastries. "In any case, Larry, what have you been up to lately?" "Senior Samuel informed me that you had left the shoe shop. Is that accurate?" I questioned, seeing as he turned pale and wavered between astonishment and dread. Taking hold of his arm, my mother-in-law barraged him with inquiries. "What took place?" "Why would you act in such way?" I went on. "Larry, I am fully informed. In the end, you were less interested in being a great businessman and more fixated on the concept of success. You didn't really have any business sense, but you acted on impulse and wasted the entire inheritance your father left behind, didn't you?" "Yes, that's correct," I said directly to my mother-in-law, who was now wearing a suspicious and increasingly irate expression. "Larry's actions have not only destroyed our household finances, but also used up his inheritance." I paused to let the enormity of the situation sink in before continuing. "I have been paying for all of the house's expenses. My wallet even provided you with the allowance you believed Larry was providing you. Furthermore, I have been footing the bill for all of Larry's foolish endeavors." My mother-in-law looked shocked and dejected as she sank back into the couch. She felt as though her son had caused a financial catastrophe, and the understanding of the situation made her lose her will to fight. I went on observing their responses. "We've been losing money while he's been posing as a businessman." Larry made an effort to reassure her. "Mom, don't worry. We get by on Jessica's income." Quickly, I said, "Don't make this seem insignificant. I've heard you're launching a new company. We've barely touched the bottom yet. Don't waste money on your fantasies anymore." The tension was evident when the cafe grew silent. I gulped down the last of my tea and declared my intentions. "Since you two have essentially run out of money, I can no longer take care of you both. You'll have to pay the rent for the next week. We will proceed with the divorce through legal counsel." "I don't want a divorce," Larry begged, his eyes welling with tears. "Don't do this, please." I made a clear decision, though. With a pale expression, my mother-in-law asked me to help. "You previously claimed that you didn't consider me to be family, Helen. Now, I would like you to start by making this payment as recompense for the burn." I firmly said, "I hope you still have some savings," and left them to take the hit. As I left the opulent hotel, I cast a sidelong glance at the imposing building, wishing they could sense the abrupt change from their opulent lifestyle to their new circumstances, a metaphorical fall from grace. In the end, we went ahead and divorced. Larry refused at first, but gave in when I said I would call the police to report the assault. My mother-in-law was someone I could never forgive, but removing her from my life would make it easier for me to move on. I asked to be compensated significantly for emotional pain as part of the settlement. They afterwards moved into a small flat. The relationship between my stingy ex-husband and his dejected mother grew more and more tense. My once haughty mother-in-law turned to part-time cleaning jobs in her quest for independence, which made me smile wryly. Larry, on the other hand, was struggling to make ends meet and was deeply in debt. I couldn't help but notice the irony of their altered situation at night. Larry would seem to be better suited for a regular work given his true ability. When I looked at it another way, the dynamic personality that first drew me to him proved to be nothing more than impulsiveness and superficiality. These characteristics were accentuated by the opulent lifestyle made possible by my father-in-law's inheritance. I've returned to working regularly from my folks' house as of late. Later, I had a meeting with Senior Samuel to thank him and give him an update on the issue. He expressed his admiration for my writing, and I have since begun to receive projects from him. I'm staying with my folks and focusing on starting again and taking care of my well-being for the time being. Recently, I was quite rattled up by an unexpected encounter. Unexpectedly and uncomfortably, my mother-in-law stole my passport and burned it. The passport burned swiftly, turning it to ashes in a matter of seconds. I was in complete shock that this conduct had suddenly put an end to my intentions to take a holiday to St. Bees Island. I confronted her and asked her to explain herself, but all she did was sneer and tell me icily that I was a stranger and would be staying at home with her instead of going anywhere. My spouse merely smiled, joining in the trickery. Their callous maneuver was startling, but not wholly unanticipated. Their degree of cunning, though, was something I had not expected. They laughed together at their seeming success, as if they enjoyed their plot. Frustrated and feeling the need to stand up for myself, I reminded them of who I am at that precise moment. Kayla is my name. I'm a 30-year-old linguist. As a language student and teacher at the university, I frequently spend long stretches of time overseas as part of my job to interact with various cultures and impart my expertise through my organization. I frequently have to travel for work, which means I'm often gone from home for months at a time. I never thought I would get married before starting this work, but all changed when, at the age of 25, I went back to my native country and met Peter, who would go on to become my spouse. My job requires me to travel for work around half the year, so it presents obstacles, but Peter and I were still able to stay in touch by email and phone calls. We got married when I was 27, and despite the fact that our marriage requires a lot of time spent apart, he has been nothing but supportive. I'm heading home from the airport today, and it's been 6 months since my previous visit with my husband. Even after the lengthy travel and the unexpected developments over my passport, I feel more excited than tired. I can't wait to see Peter again, and am moving fast in the direction of what I hope will be a happy reunion, and maybe a resolution to the recent chaos his family has caused. When I got home after a lengthy absence, Peter wasn't back yet, so I started to clean up a little. I always tell him to keep our apartment tidy, but it's typically a little messy. I would normally take offense at this, but today I was just too happy to see him again to care. Hearing the front door open, I busied myself in the kitchen. Peter was the one. I was so happy that I ran to give him a heartfelt, "Welcome home, Peter. I'm quite happy to see you." He gave a blah reaction saying, "Oh, hi, Kayla. You've returned. Is that all?" After 6 months apart, I thought, I was unable to conceal my dismay. "Peter, it has been 6 months since we last saw each other. Will you not admit that you missed me?" He gave a shrug. "Since this has been our routine for a time, I suppose I'm accustomed to it. Simply put, I'm exhausted. Is dinner ready to eat?" "Indeed, it's prepared. I said, attempting to get over the awkwardness. Let's eat. Dinner seemed special today, as it usually did, especially after spending so many months apart, but it was also a little melancholic. He appeared to be split attention, looking down at his phone all the time. I had to voice how frustrated I was. Hey, Peter, what's up with you always looking at your phone? He was contemptuous. There's nothing wrong, but we've been in contact via calls and emails while you've been away, right? Nothing new needs to be discussed. That was painful. That may be the case, Peter, but our relationship hasn't been for a while. That ought to be taken into consideration. I was getting more and more frustrated, and it seemed to be upsetting him. With a start, he got up, set his phone down, and gave me a fierce look. What do you know? I'm tired from work, but you just got off a plane. His remarks hurt. Hold on. I also came straight here after work, I shot back. Don't speak to me in that manner. You weren't asked to hurry. You decided to return home right away, he retorted icily. His words wounded me, but I had to express how I felt. You don't have to use that exact phrase. In spite of everything, I thought about you. We both paused at that point, the weight of our words lingering over us. When I had returned home after several months away, the atmosphere was eerily tense. It was colder than Peter had anticipated. He blurted out, I'm just saying, I didn't ask you to rush home, as we were sitting down to supper. If this is how you're going to behave, then you should consider not returning at all. Kayla, you're annoying me. He stormed out of the room, slamming the table in frustration, and left his food unfinished. I was by myself and was perplexed. Why was he behaving so distant? Though it seemed like I was the only one looking forward to our reunion, I had been looking forward to it. If returning home early would just result in disappointment, what was the point? I sat there crying on the table, a sinking sense of dread overpowering the delight of our reunion. The tension persisted in the morning. I responded, "Good morning," to him, and he sent me a cold look and remarked, I envy you. You are able to unwind at home all the time, whereas I am confined to my desk. I corrected him, since that was untrue. Peter, it is not correct. Compiling a summary of our operations and getting ready for the upcoming training session are among my many tasks. You underestimate how much work it is. He disregarded everything I had tried. Yes, but you could work from home instead. I would love to be able to take half of the year off from work. You have fun when you're at home, princess. His sardonic tone stunned me, and I watched him walk out of the home without saying anything more. He had never been this savage. We'd had our share of arguments in the past. I was perplexed by his sardonic manner and concerned about the developing distance between us. I busied myself with domestic duties, including vacuuming and changing the sheets, while I thought about what could help us salvage our relationship. My phone rang in the middle of this. My mother-in-law was there. Hello, Kayla here, I replied, feeling uneasy. Hello, Kayla. It has been some while. I've heard you're back at home and that yesterday wasn't so good. Yes, that's correct, I hesitantly answered. And Peter is upset too, I heard. He was quite irate. My uncertainty and anxiety increased after the conversation, and I began to wonder how I would mend the rift that had grown between us since my return. I was taken aback by my mother-in-law's proposal during the phone chat. How about we arrange a family vacation now that you're back? She said. She went on. I was talking with my husband about going to St. B's Island, and Peter mentioned he wanted to join us. Before I could even begin to grasp the concept. I take it you're used to taking trips overseas? Could you assist us with making hotel reservations and making other plans? Her request was fulfilled. Her tone made it obvious that she saw an opportunity to take advantage of my travel experience, rather than truly enjoying the idea of going on a trip with me. My mother-in-law and I had never gotten along well. Since that day at the wedding reception when we first met, she had never disguised her contempt for me. She'd always had a snarky attitude. She had been married for 3 years, but her opinions had not changed. When I was working abroad, she often sent me messages that stung. How can you be a wife and stay away from home for months? If you don't take care of the house, I'd rather my son marry someone else. It was a mistake to let him marry you. These memories made me apprehensive about her proposal. It felt like I was being used to facilitate their travel plans, a task that seemed more appealing than enduring her usual critiques. I was frustrated with myself for my inability to decline, even though I recognized that I was being manipulated. A few hours later, Peter returned from work in a noticeably better mood than he had been earlier. He dropped his briefcase on the sofa, flashed a wide smile, and said, "Mom called, didn't she? We can go on a trip to St. Bees." "Yeah, I heard," I replied cautiously. "But you're not thinking of turning it down, are you? Mom wants you to come with us," he pressed. His enthusiasm made it even harder to express my reservations. I understood his desire for me to be involved, but the dynamics made me uneasy. How could I navigate this situation without escalating tensions or feeling even more used? As the conversation about the family trip continued, I cautiously suggested, "Why don't you just go with your mom and dad as you originally planned?" The moment those words left my lips, Peter's attitude shifted dramatically. He clicked his tongue, and his voice took on a more threatening tone. "You need to understand your role here. The only time you're useful to us is when we're traveling." His words stung. "You don't have to speak like that," I protested. "It's true, isn't it?" he retorted, undeterred. "Anyway, you'll handle all the flight and hotel bookings, and everything should be in my name, as you probably know." "But Peter, you're going to pay for the whole trip?" I asked, trying to clarify our financial arrangement. "What are you talking about? We'll split the cost 50-50. It's a small price to pay to show respect to our parents," he argued, implying that my objection was disrespectful. "And what is that supposed to mean?" I questioned. "If you've got time to lounge around at home, make the reservations now," he demanded. "This isn't right. I don't want to," I mumbled, my voice barely above a whisper. "What are you mumbling about?" he scoffed, grabbing a beer from the fridge and downing it in one gulp. Despite my inner turmoil and the unfairness of the situation, I felt cornered, embarrassed, and without a real choice. I proceeded to make all the arrangements for the flights and accommodations for the trip to St. Bert's Island, just as Peter and his mother had insisted. On the day of the trip, I was set to pick them up at my in-laws' house and head straight to the airport. But a few days before our departure, I found myself restless and unable to sleep. Late at night, I realized Peter wasn't beside me. I walked to the living room and overheard him on the phone. "It's okay, Mom. I'll be there first thing in the morning as planned. Please handle the passport issue anyway. Seriously, I'm looking forward to it. I'll make sure to introduce her to you," he said into the receiver. Hearing this, I was filled with a mix of emotions. What was supposed to be a family trip was turning into a series of commands and manipulations. And now, there were secrets too. I stood there, unsure of how to confront this new revelation. When I returned to bed, Peter's conversation still echoed in my mind. He had mentioned a passport and introduced someone, and since he was speaking to his mother, I was sure it was my mother-in-law on the other end. There seemed to be hidden plans that I wasn't privy to, which made me uneasy about the upcoming trip. It was clear that something was being orchestrated behind my back, but I couldn't grasp the full extent of it. Resolved to remain vigilant, I prepared for our departure with caution. The day of our trip to St. Bert's Island finally arrived. I methodically packed both my carry-on and handbag, including items for my husband, ensuring we were ready for the journey. With everything set, Peter and I drove to my in-laws' house. As we approached, I braced myself, unsure of what awaited us, but ready to face whatever might come. Upon our arrival, it was only my mother-in-law who greeted us. "Oh, hi, Kayla. It's been a while. Good to see you. We're almost ready. I just need to grab a few things for the trip, so it might be a little while," she said, her tone casual, but with a sense of urgency that raised my suspicions further. "Okay, take your time," I replied. Then she added, "Oh, and Kayla, could you bring the carry-on case from the other room? It's heavy, so please get Peter to help you." "Sure, I'll do that," I agreed, keenly observing the exchange of knowing glances between my husband and mother-in-law. I kept my passport securely in my pocket, an instinctual move born from the mistrust that had been building. As I followed my husband's directions and returned to the living room with the carry-on, I found my mother-in-law waiting with a mischievous grin. To my horror, she was holding my passport in her hands. "Now you can't go on the trip to St. Bert's," she declared with a smirk. "What do you mean?" I asked. "I'm going to burn this passport right now," she threatened. "What did you just say?" I reacted in disbelief, the gravity of her words sinking in. "I was just using you to handle the trip arrangements," she admitted callously. "You're a stranger here, so you'll be staying behind. Too bad." Her words struck me like a cold slap. The situation was far worse than I had imagined, and the betrayal cut deep. I realized I was not just an outsider in their plans, but a mere pawn in whatever game they were playing. The revelation left me reeling, unsure of how to respond to such blatant manipulation and deceit. My mother-in-law made an abrupt and startling move when she raced into the kitchen, ignited a lighter, and set a passport on fire in the sink. The paper rapidly caught fire and, in front of us, turned to black ashes. "We did it!" she exclaimed gleefully when it was utterly destroyed. My spouse cheered and joined in. "Yes, Mom! We succeeded." "No," I said in reply. "This trip is just the three of us, right? When we return, we'll get to meet Peter's new girlfriend." With a casual reply, "Yeah, I've already set that up," my mother-in-law said. "We don't need this useless woman anymore." Coldly, my father-in-law added his voice. Then, appearing proud of himself, he took out his cell phone and showed me images of himself with another woman. "You're remaining here while we leave on our trip. I'm not divorcing you to protect my reputation. You can go, and I'll move in with her when we return." His remarks caused my mother-in-law to chuckle sarcastically, their faces displaying a deep hatred. I realized then that I was no longer a member of this family. I asked, "By the way, whose passport is that?" While forcing a smile. "What topic are you discussing? Of course it's yours." "I removed it from your purse," she declared with assurance. "My passport is in this pocket right here," I stated, pointing to the real document. "What? Why, it just cannot be," she stumbled, her self-assurance wavering. I displayed my passport to her, undamaged. "It is, in fact, my passport. Examine yourself." Her face turned pale with terror as the realization hit her. Her voice quivering, she whispered, "That's not possible." It seems that my mother-in-law mistakenly believed she had removed my passport from my purse. Malicious as she was, her intentions had not included carefully inspecting the passport before burning it. Her question was mixed with confusion and dread, her voice trembling. "Whose passport did I burn then?" she inquired. "I guess it was your son's passport that was in there," I said. "You burned my son's passport?" Terrified, she questioned. My mother-in-law became pale as she realized how serious her error had been. Her reckless behavior and the revealed underlying plots have irreversibly damaged the already tense family dynamics. Chaos broke out as soon as my mother-in-law learnt the passport she had destroyed belonged to her son. My spouse yanked a tantrum at her. "What actions have you taken? I cautioned you to use caution." In her handbag, I only discovered one passport. Who would have guessed that I owned it? "It doesn't concern me," he yelled. "You didn't check thoroughly, and now look what happened. Are you implying that I'm to blame? I wouldn't have made this mistake if you had checked from the beginning," she shot out, her voice rising in defense. They started criticizing one another as their fight quickly became more heated. Into the chaos, my spouse turned to face me. "Hey, Kayla, do something." However, I refused to be pulled into their mess any longer. "Really? Who do you think is directing my actions? You secretly cheated on me. You are really daring. You and your mother are both abhorrent," I answered back. "Hey, who do you think you're talking to?" My spouse lost his cool. "I'm speaking with both you and your terrible mother. I'm not going to ignore this, I promise. You're going to make up for the affair and everything your mother said to me that was hurtful. Get set." I said that I was going to get tougher. My father-in-law arrived at that moment, drawn by the commotion. "What's the situation here?" he asked. "What are you doing?" I told him everything, and he got furious. There were serious repercussions when the scheduled trip was abruptly canceled. My husband's father shunned him and forbade him from going back home, and my mother-in-law was considering filing for divorce. I got legal advice and went ahead with the divorce. In addition, I required my ex-husband and ex-mother-in-law to pay alimony in full and to reimburse me for the expenses incurred from the postponed trip to St. Nevis Island. They were ill-prepared financially and had to borrow money to cover these costs. Ultimately, my ex-husband ended up in a difficult financial condition and is currently living with his mother. The woman he had an affair with also left him. I moved into a condo and started over with the alimony money, embracing an independent life free from abuse and infidelity in the interim. I overcame a lot of obstacles to get stronger. I'm enjoying life now, have plans to travel more. I'm learning about other cultures and am sharing my experiences with the globe. It's almost unbelievable. Are you people actually coming to this ceremony? It amazes me that you have the courage. Jesus, what? Why would you make such a statement? As you can see, there is a certain amount of decorum required for this function. That elegance is diminished by having a family like yours, which isn't as wealthy. Therefore, would you kindly depart as soon as possible? Our family was present for the happy occasion of my brother's wedding on this particular day. Nevertheless, my brother's fiancé's surprising remarks started to eclipse the happiness. Wearing a veil of pristine white, her remarks were weighty and frigid, belying her exquisite clothing and casting a darkness over our hearts. She felt aware of the eyes on her and cast a disdainful glance at our family. We were left very perplexed. It appeared that she felt our presence devalued the status quo in her universe. Her one-sided, blatantly insulting remarks showed blatant disregard for our family. Only our father chuckled aloud, as if to ease the tension in the room, even though we were furious over this unfair treatment. Aha! In its own unique manner, this is quite the masterpiece. Dad, what are you laughing at? No need to worry, let's get going from here. My father's unexpected outburst of laughter and his comments stunned everyone in the room and silenced the throng. I'm Mia, and I'm 25 years old. I graduated from a mediocre institution and work as an administrative assistant for a reputable corporation, so I have a typical life. I think ordinary sums up my journey thus far the best. However, my father is regarded as an expert in the field of neurology. Following several years of employment at an academic medical center, he founded his own clinic. Retired from active duty, he now dedicates all of his time to brain research. A dependable junior who underwent extensive training from my father is in charge of the clinic. I get asked the same question a lot by my parents and close friends. Why don't you become a doctor? They have expectations, but my response is usually the same. I can't handle the pressure of dealing with human life and death. Naturally, I want to help people and make a positive impact on society, but that doesn't imply I have the self-assurance to carry out the noble responsibility of being a doctor. My brother John, on the other hand, has chosen a different route and is going into medicine. He is 2 years my senior and has always had stellar academic standing. He was accepted right away to the prestigious National University Medical School once his talent was recognized. He doesn't seem ugly, and it appears that women like him a lot. Despite being handsome and academically bright, it appears that this has gradually warped his psyche. John's transformation from when I was a high school student was evident. He started dating after passing the medical school admission exam, and his trips home grew fewer and farther between. Although he appeared to be enrolled in college, his social media accounts consistently showed him having fun with various ladies. My father eventually became aware of this fact, and one day it sparked a family argument. When my brother finally made it home a few weeks later, my father chastised him severely. "John, could you tell me exactly what you're doing at the university?" My father said, his face solemn. With a casual reply, John said, "Dad, what are you exaggerating for?" "My academics are going well, and I'm receiving all the credits I require." "However," Father persisted, "I don't mean to say that. Naturally, getting good marks is crucial, but being a doctor requires more than just that. You must possess the ability to understand the emotions of your patients." John grumbled and shot back, saying, "You know, Dad, that's really annoying. In this day and age, you can become anything with the correct talents. Could you please quit using these old sentimental plots?" My father was simultaneously startled and furious. "What are you saying?" John grew even more self-assured. "This stuffy environment bothers me. Old guy, please cease interfering in your son's affairs." My brother was not afraid to tell our parents exactly what he believed at that time. He had also begun to call me, his sister, derogatory names. He told me, "You're not as good as me," without trying to disguise his opinion that I was less than him. "Everywhere you go, someone as awkward as you will just keep falling. You're lucky to have me as a wonderful brother." He used to call me names every time he got home. Since we were little, I've constantly compared myself to my brother, and as a result, I've never been able to respond to him. It seems that his actions throughout the interviews were the cause of his failure. Fortunately, my father's old acquaintances at both hospitals told us the truth about the situation. Despite his inexperience, my brother displayed contemptuous and haughty demeanor in front of the interviewers, asserting that he could increase the hospital's earnings. With a scornful laugh, he mocked our father's lessons about the value of having empathy for patients. My father spoke to him after learning about my brother's predicament. He was confused and on the edge of giving up. "John, for the time being, start working at our family's hospital," the father stated severely but gently. John asked in shock, "Why should I have to do that?" in response. Father went on to clarify, pressing my brother, "Is it because you're having trouble finding another job? Start over by relearning the fundamentals here until you locate the ideal location." Though he reluctantly agreed, my brother's discontent was evident in his countenance. "Damn, I guess there's no choice." My brother displayed an overtly unpleasant attitude toward our family. But his rage was unfair by nature. My brother was lost and roaming when he was welcomed into our father's home and given a place to stay. It's unclear if my father took this action because he felt a strong sense of ethical obligation as a doctor, out of pure paternal love, or for other reasons. But there's hope that my brother will develop into a real doctor who can feel other people's suffering. And yet, not even the faintest hint suggests that my brother plans to realize that dream. He works at our father's hospital right now, but I've heard negative things about him from patients, and he has a terrible reputation. My brother's conceit hasn't diminished. On the contrary, it has become more apparent. He claims to be our father's successor as director and speaks as though he has already assumed the role within the institution. All we can do is wait, tensely, to see whether and when my brother will receive my father's sincere sentiments and wishes. In the midst of all of this, my brother unexpectedly brought someone home. His fiancée needed to meet the family. "Dad, Mom, this is my fiancée," John introduced her with confidence. We were momentarily at a loss for words, shocked and confused by the suddenness. The fiancée, though outwardly elegant and clean, had something unsettling about her casual gestures and smile. On the day she first stepped into our home, John's fiancée glanced over our family with an indescribably smug smile. I felt an unusual discomfort from her gaze. Questions swirled in my mind. Why does she seem so unsettling? Could it just be my imagination that I feel this discomfort? From our first meeting, in the back of my mind, there was the inescapable fact that this person would become my sister-in-law, a member of our family. Despite these feelings, movements toward my brother's marriage went forward. Previously living alone, my brother began to show up at our home more often since his engagement. However, these visits were not for the sake of spending warm moments with the family. Instead, he came home to ask our parents for financial help. Just the other day, he was asking my father for a substantial amount of support for the wedding preparations. "John, of course, I am happy that you're getting married, but as someone building a household, I want you to sincerely engage with each patient," my father began. "How many times will I be lectured? I pride myself on engaging sufficiently," John replied with dissatisfaction. "Then why are there constant complaints from patients? Even the current director has heard multiple requests for changing doctors from your patients." Father pointed out specific examples as he spoke. "Maturing," John said. "That's probably because my diagnosis didn't align with their expectations. They should follow advice without complaining all the time," he retorted. Father, with a firmer tone, added, "That attitude is the problem. The hospital's reputation suffers because of how you act alone. I want you to realize the gravity of this," he advised once again. John clicked his tongue in annoyance and said, "All right, I get it. So I should be more empathetic to the patients, right? If that will satisfy you, then please help me with the wedding expenses. I want to make it an unforgettable occasion for Jessica's sake." That was his request. Both Mother and I were momentarily swayed by John's passionate plea. After a period of deep contemplation, Father finally spoke as if he had made up his mind. "Okay, John, but on the condition that you grow into a proper doctor and a man who can support a family?" "Yes, Dad. I promise I'll become the trustworthy doctor you hope for. If you keep that promise, we will take care of the wedding expenses." "Thank you, Dad. I'll show you the estimates later." Sometime later, the estimate John sent was for the hefty sum of $60,000. Holding the estimate that surprised me, I questioned my father's intent. "Dad, are you sure? Are you really going to pay such a high price for the ceremony?" A wedding is a once-in-a-lifetime event. John wants to create lifelong memories for Jessica and for themselves. That resonates with me. "But Dad, isn't that just brother being deceptive? And to spend such a large sum of $60,000. "It's okay, Mia. I believe John has reflected on his past to some extent and is reassessing himself." "Do you really think so? That my brother would reflect on his actions?" "Indeed. But Mia, when the time comes for you to get married, this father will also provide for the expenses. Does that settle your heart?" "That doesn't provide a solution. However, I won't mind if Dad is happy with it. In spite of my discomfort, I told myself that my father had the last say when it came to my brother John's financial decisions. It was not for me to object if he chose to support John's pledge because he believed in it. I resolved to refrain from unnecessarily interfering after that. Still, my worry became more acute and persistent in the back of my mind. I chose to take advantage of a rare day off from my hectic schedule to go shopping in the city center. That's when I happened to run into John and Jessica, his fiancée. When they noticed me, they came over to smile meaningfully. Oh no, if that's not Mia! Hasn't it been a very long time? Brother, what are you doing here? Are you unaware of this? Are you planning to attend the wedding in a month? I am, after all, family. I'll be present. Seriously, get excited about it and make sure the gift is decent, all right? Momentum forced me to make a proper wedding gift, which I did with regret. Jessica abruptly entered the conversation and questioned me after hearing my answer. Mia, have you decided how much you're going to give for the wedding gift? Yes, I've looked up the usual amount. Well, if it's less than $2,500, I'd really like you to reconsider. Come on, you're siblings after all. What do you mean by that? It is customary to donate a minimum of $2,000. Is that not basic sense that all people possess? Does that make any sense at all? Jessica's request was completely new to me. I was aware that siblings would often exchange wedding gifts for between $400 and $600. In spite of this, I had decided to donate $1,000 in order to prevent any more issues. But it was beyond my wildest expectations to be asked for such an unexpected and outrageous amount. When it wasn't even the sibling getting married, what kind of presumptions were being made to warrant such a large sum? I was really taken aback by what she said, and the uneasy feeling I had had at our initial family meetings began to come back. It quickly became clear that my future sister-in-law would be a lot more challenging to get along with than I had imagined. I told my folks about this unexpected development as soon as I got home. Despite my concerns, they both seemed composed and agreed that $1,000 was a suitable amount for the wedding gift. That was a lot of money, but I grudgingly agreed to provide it since I didn't want to stir up any more controversy. I thought that was the best course of action, even if it didn't provide a refutation of Jessica's unreasonable demands. A month later, still having misgivings about my brother, I went to his wedding, feeling a little awkward in my pretty green dress. Despite the underlying uneasiness, it was a departure tinged with exhilaration and a sense of obligation. I lost myself in the party as soon as I entered the hall adorned for the occasion. There was a happy vibe in the air. The extravagant spread of food was a visual feast for the senses, and the decor were colorful. Amidst all the grandeur, the somber event appeared to be carrying time on its wings. Following the wedding, the bride and groom visit each table to snap pictures with the guests as part of a custom. Jessica's smile, when she and my brother arrived at our table, was clearly tinted with contempt. Oh, what is this? You're just showing up as usual? The presence of a low-income family detracts from the whole event's class. If you could depart a little early, that would be great. Her remarks touched a raw nerve in me, causing me to feel astonishment and wrath like never before. An impoverished household? The idea itself was absurd and totally unacceptable. How did she offend her spouse's family with such composure? Not only did I look stunned, but our parents were at a loss for words. My brother chuckled loudly next to them, and I looked at him expectantly, wanting an explanation. I questioned in a shaky voice, perplexed. Wait a minute, brother. How would you describe this circumstance? Why would Jessica confidently utter such heinous things? John answered, Why? Since this is the way things really are. You can see that you are not like me, the victor. He laughed smugly and boasted, I'm already set to become the next head of the clinic, a winner in life. My brother exuded total arrogance, as though he were flaunting his accomplishments to the world. His lack of awareness of us losers shocked me. Furthermore, our father's assistance allowed him to acquire his current position. Our family became quiet, and Jess questioned sternly, "Really? When are you going to quit whining at John? Are you not curious about your parents' exploitation of their child's skills?" Jessica remarked in jest. I stammered over my words as I tried to contain my shock and hurt feelings. "Jessica, why would you say such—" "You too, you work at some lower-tier company, don't you?" Jessica asked nonchalantly. "I looked up your wedding gift, and it was only $1,000. How pitiful." My pride was wounded when Jessica spat out. I made an attempt to defend myself, but failed. "No, it's only that," Jessica persisted without mercy. "That makes sense, then. Isn't it the case that your parents are attempting to take advantage of the fact that their son is exceptional and will take over as clinic director in the future? Because of this, disadvantaged families might be problematic." Incredulous, I shot back, "The next clinic director?" Jessica confidently answered, "Yes, exactly. The present director has acknowledged John and promised him a position as the next director." The sister-in-law looked down on our family as if to mock us as she angrily spoke her hateful remarks. My brother smiled happily next to her, seemingly self-assured in his claim. Jessica's account suggested that my brother had been informing her about our family's financial predicament. My mother worked part-time, my father was unemployed, and I was a temporary employee of a little-known business. On the other hand, my brother took great pride in telling his classmates that he was tight with the clinic director and that he had been promised the post of the next director. Unaware of these details, the actual clinic director was taken aback when told this information, and a small rift started to form among those in attendance. Jessica and John smiled even more smugly. But, ironically, it was my father who changed the environment. Laughing loudly and holding his belly, he suddenly burst out laughing. The venue's atmosphere changed as his laughter reverberated across the space. "What a grand farce this is," my father exclaimed, chuckling. With a nervous expression, I said, "Dad, it's okay. Simply laugh it off. Come with me home," he said, his voice full of laughter. I gasped in shock and said, "What? Are we really heading out already?" "Yes, we're leaving," he answered in a tone of despair. "We're just a poor family to be laughed at, not welcomed here." "But is that really okay?" I asked. Father, though, had already started toward the door. My brother and his spouse promptly encouraged them to depart as this discussion was taking place. Then, the father turned to face his son, his expression composed. "Look, John, you should control your vanity. I don't know why you have to put on such a front." "What?" "Father, what are you talking about? I'm not playing any tricks. Is it indeed the case? If that's the case, you, as the rumored to be the next director, ought to be able to demonstrate your qualifications elsewhere, outside of this hospital. With your skills, you ought to be able to succeed in any hospital and become the next director. Or do you lack self-assurance? Given that this next director talk is just your tall yarn, that was to be expected." When Father had calmly finished his sentence, John silently clamped his lips and looked down. He was surrounded by Jessica, who had heard the exchange and clenched his arm, her face going pale. "John, what's going on? How come Dad has the authority to terminate you?" Overtaken by the sudden change of events, John remained silent, his body language a maelstrom of unfathomable feelings. Jessica's voice got louder as she demanded an explanation. "John, respond to me. Did you not say that you were going to be the future director of the hospital? Did you not commit to support our future, including significant occasions like today?" Jessica tried to gain a response, But John was effectively in shock and had the attitude of someone who was totally cut off from the outside world. Upon observing this, Father grinned softly, displaying a patient and understanding expression. "Jessica, it's critical to comprehend the larger picture. Actually, I used to be the director of the same hospital where John works." Jessica's shocked eyes grew wider. "How come? However, Dad, you work for yourself, don't you? That is only one of the numerous fabrications that John has created. I am a doctor, that much is true. My spouse is entirely focused on our house, and Mia holds a steady managerial role at a top business in the sector. No, that isn't possible. We're not the impoverished family that the media made us out to be then. Actually, due to John's persistent failures in his job search for a medical position, I've had to assist him more than once. It was never the plan to have him serve as director. The things that have happened today have only reinforced my right decision. With peace of mind, I can now finally fire him from the hospital." Jessica discovered a truth that was drastically different from the one she had been led to think by her father's confessions. The atmosphere shifted as more of the truth came to light, and a new understanding was sensed. Jessica's tone was a mixture of irritation and mistrust. "Is that a sign that you are—" "Yes, I have decided to terminate John and have requested the substantial $60,000 wedding bill. Her family won't put up with that at all." "You're not serious at all. That is not possible." Jessica's complexion changed quickly as the surroundings became hushed. The father called to my mother and me and said, "Well, let's go home," in a composed manner. We gave each other a meaningful nod before making our way calmly out of the building. Jessica's tortured cry resounded throughout the hallway as we left. I found out later that the ceremony had been called off. The people in attendance started to leave, and the gift money that was meant to pay for the wedding expenditures was gone. It turned into a major financial burden rather than paying for the wedding expenses. John, who was now unemployed and under financial difficulty, and Jessica, who had quit her job to become a director's wife, didn't have nearly enough cash to pay for the $60,000 wedding expenses, so they were forced into debt. They appear to be balancing several part-time jobs at the moment, in addition to seeking steady, full-time work. Despite being a doctor, my brother has little chance of receiving employment offers from respectable facilities. Regarding the family we left behind, we haven't talked about my brother since that awful event. My parents are no longer concerned about his future as they before were, and there are happy smiles in our home. No matter how smart someone is, they will never fit in anywhere in society if they have no empathy for other people. As my father often emphasized, I believe that having good interpersonal skills is far more important than getting great scores in school. I genuinely want to be able to connect with others, and I promise to work even harder going forward to achieve that goal. I began to worry that there may be a thief in our home. The sight of shoes by the door, both men's and women's, made me frown. Since neither my husband nor I were meant to be home, our house ought to be empty. Nonetheless, I sensed that someone was present in the restroom as well as at the door. Someone was clearly having fun because of the loud, vulgar voice coming from the restroom. While it's common for husbands to invite their mistresses home while their spouses are away, this situation isn't plausible. My spouse was standing right next to me, palely staring toward the lavatory, so this voice couldn't be his. I'm Jessica, and Adam and I have been wed for 3 years. We are not yet parents because we are both employed. Nonetheless, I think we have a contented and affectionate life, going out or traveling on our days off. Fortunately, neither our in-laws nor parents put any pressure on us to get a family. Since they actually reside close by, we are able to keep our positive relationship going and get together for family dinners. Our in-laws suggested that we rent the lovely, slightly older home. Once a month, on average, we have dinner parties. My mom and I always cook the meal, and we spend the evenings eating food supplied by our in-laws and drinking Dad's favorite wine. Mom had visited that day in the morning to assist with setting for the dinner party, but she appeared abnormally quiet and depressed. She voiced her concerns as she was chopping the ingredients, asking herself, "Do we really need this much? We may not have enough time to complete it all." She wasn't like this at all. "What's wrong, Mom? For today, we've simply prepared the standard amount," I inquired. She gave me a startled look before laughing it off. "Dear, I apologize. I'm concerned since Dad hasn't been eating as much as he used to." "Are you serious? Does Dad have a bad cold?" I inquired. Since his early years, my dad has been a self-made businessman, a self-proclaimed entrepreneur. He's never wavered in his work ethic. I hardly remember my dad playing with me on his days off when I was a kid. I worry for him, even though I don't remember him being around that much. The idea that he could be working himself sick worries me. Mom was hesitant to talk at first, perhaps so as not to frighten me, but she did talk when she did. "It's not a disease. Although Dad is in excellent health, he has been acting aloof lately. He has been critiquing my dinner and remarking on how simple my outfit is." Why would he say such things? I pondered. That he would say that to Mom, who has always been the center of our family, is terrible. Mom, though, dismissed it with a "I'm fine." Perhaps Dad's recent company startup has caused him a little stress. Even though I remained worried, we allowed the conversation to wane and returned to cooking despite her assurances. We were going to cook Dad a special dinner today, complete with his favorite steak and dessert, to help him with his new business. My spouse, Adam, was preoccupied as usual and couldn't unwind until everything was immaculate. He always makes sure the living room and entry are spotless before we entertain company, even when it's just the family. He is very careful about cleanliness. Dad, my mother-in-law Teresa, and my father-in-law Eric arrived as I was finishing up the garden. "Jessica, can I have a word?" I was checking the pan to fry the steak when Teresa shouted out to me. She entered the kitchen with a serious expression on her face and handed me a box that appeared to be a present without saying anything. Perplexed, I accepted it, and to my surprise, when opening it, was the emblem of a well-known steakhouse. There were thick, excellent steaks inside that smelled so good. As it happened, we had unintentionally made the same dish. I figured that cooking fewer steaks would be a simple enough solution. It was not the first time our gifts had happened to match, after all. "Wow, did you go out of your way to buy this?" I asked with a smile. We could have asked about the steaks, but we heard it was a celebration. It feels a little strange. Shall we simply serve today's gifted steaks? "But you and Adam can still eat them, right?" Teresa retorted. "Since we're older now, eating too much meat may seem a little heavy." I was at a loss for words. Since Mom had assisted with the preparations, it felt improper to prepare so much food that would be wasted because everyone in the family is getting close to 50. "You need to have made a statement. How callous," Teresa said as she walked out of the kitchen. She didn't see my reaction as she left with the steaks, but I was astonished by her remarks. That was the first time I had heard someone say something like that. In the past, we never planned our gifts together, and even when we did end up giving each other the same thing, we usually laughed it off. Previously, we had always given each other chocolates or similar things as gifts. I was a little uncomfortable, but I didn't give it much thought because I reasoned that she might have been offended by the pricey gift. Dad was ecstatic about the steak from the upscale restaurant during the dinner gathering. With a quick glance, Mom appeared to comprehend my predicament and obligingly pretended to be just as thrilled about the steaks we had cooked. Teresa, Eric, and Dad departed, and Mom cleverly made beef stew using the remaining ingredients. "Before they were cooked, we could have still had the steak," I remarked. you would have grown weary of steak together. Mom said, putting her portion in a food container and saying, "This way, you can take it home." Mom made a great beef stew, and even though I felt a little awful about it, Adam and I devoured it rapidly as the flavors melded together. I later learned that Dad wasn't happy with the stew, calling it out of date, even though it was delicious. Mom's meek little smile made me feel even more angry than I had before. Yet, I was unable to let go of my anger. After that dinner party, I received an unexpected message from Adam a few weeks later. Due to developments on the client's end, the overnight business trip he was scheduled to take had to be canceled. He informed me that he will return home as normal. I had intended to spend some time at my parents' house since he was expected to be away for 5 days. But my intentions changed when he returned home. I informed my mother over the phone before meeting Adam to go home. I noticed something odd when we got home. Did we forget to turn off the lights? Certain that I had turned everything off before we left, I inquired. Since there was a light on close to the entryway, I apologize for wasting the electricity. Adam, however, reassured me, adding, "Don't worry about it," as he put the front door key in. Then all of a sudden, he was silent. I said, "What's wrong?" Adam said, "The front door is unlocked," which caused me to froze. Contemplating the possibility of an intruder, I discreetly removed my phone and began recording. I gave Adam a gesture in my direction, and he cautiously opened the front door. "Whose shoes are these?" he inquired, gesturing to a selection of women's pumps and men's leather shoes in the foyer. These sneakers obviously did not belong to us. I might have thought Adam was cheating by bringing another woman home if these were his shoes and he wasn't present. However, the fact that he was standing directly next to me indicated that there was an intruder in our home. Adam, sensing my concern, reached for his umbrella, prepared to use it if necessary, and stepped forward. We saw that the light in the living room was on, and that food was strewn all over the table, as though it had just been purchased. It didn't seem like a burglar would take such action. I pondered. Subsequently, I detected a voice approaching, and it became evident that the noise originated from the restroom. The person who was speaking was in the restroom. Adam was quite frightened, and I could understand why. The voice was gritty and disturbing. The idea that someone was using our house without our knowledge unnerved us. Curious and worried about who could be doing this, I slowly opened the bathroom door and immediately saw some clothes thrown around. "Ah!" I gasped, unable to hold back the sound. The clothes were unmistakably my dad's. His large jacket, neatly hung on a hanger, was the one he had worn at the dinner party just the other day. The shirt and pants, carelessly discarded, were all too familiar. Mom had left just a few hours ago, so there was no way she could be here. It looked like Dad had brought another woman into my home for an affair. The realization made me frown as I looked up at Adam, wondering how I could explain this to him. He was staring, pale-faced, at a necklace resting on top of the washing machine. I recognized the necklace and the earrings beside it. They belonged to my mom. "This can't be, Mom," Adam said. His words confirmed it. The people using our home for their affair were my dad and Teresa. I pulled Adam, who seemed ready to burst in on them, back to the living room. Moving away from the echoing voices seemed to help him calm down a bit. "Shouldn't we call your mom and my dad?" Adam suggested, though he seemed unsure. The thought of bringing Mom and Eric here now felt like it would lead to a crisis for both families. But I couldn't just ignore what was happening. The vulgar noises were still coming from the bathroom, suggesting they wouldn't come out anytime soon. I contacted Mom, and Adam reached out to Eric right away. "It's about Dad," Adam said. "Your dad told me he was going golfing today. He left early this morning and won't be back until tonight. Should I tell him to call you when he gets back?" It seems that Dad is at home with Teresa, I said, unable to mention what was actually happening in the bathroom. But that was enough for Mom to understand the seriousness of the situation. In a tense voice, she said, "I'll be right there," and hung up. Less than 20 minutes later, Mom arrived, looking pale, with Eric right behind her, utterly bewildered. The voices had stopped, but we could still hear the shower running. Thankfully, the loud voices that had filled the hallway earlier were no longer heard. "Adam, what do you mean Teresa is here? I told you Mom went on a day trip with friends and won't be back until tonight," Eric asked, full of questions. We had informed him that Dad was with someone, but whether he was confused or just didn't want to accept it, he avoided looking toward the bathroom. Feeling sorry for Eric, Adam signaled to me, and I started recording on my phone again. Adam made no effort to hide his approach as he stormed into the bathroom. "Hey, what the heck are you doing in our house?" Adam shouted as he pushed the room door open, making a dull sound. Screams from Dad and Teresa were followed by loud arguing between Dad and Adam. Adam, now standing in the doorway, grumbled in disgust. I grabbed a bath towel and tossed it into the bathroom, desperately wanting to avoid seeing them make it. I really didn't want to see that behind me. Mom, no longer able to hold back, pushed past me and stormed into the bathroom. She shoved Adam and Teresa aside, and with a voice I'd never heard from her before, dragged Dad out of the room. Eric, finally mustering his courage, followed Mom into the bathroom and pulled Teresa out. Both of them hurriedly dressed in their scattered clothes, and within minutes, they were sitting in the hallway with their hair still damp. All of us, including me, were panting heavily, our shoulders rising and falling with each breath. Mom broke the silence with a thin voice. "Why her?" Her question was the start of Dad and Teresa's explanations. It all began with Teresa developing a crush on Dad. Since Dad is a company president, he has connections with some flashy industries. He pays much more attention to his appearance than most men his age, and even I have to admit, he looks stylish and sophisticated. Teresa reportedly fell for Dad the moment they met, captivated by his demeanor. Their relationship started to grow during the family gatherings we organized for Adam's and my wedding. Teresa, trying to show herself as a good person, eagerly took charge of planning the dinner parties, gradually getting closer to Dad. At one of these dinner parties, she finally worked up the courage to confess her feelings. Adam, looking sick to his stomach, glared at Teresa. But Dad was also part of the problem. He was drawn to Teresa, who dressed in bold makeup and flashy clothes, exuding a feminine allure in contrast to Mom, who quietly took care of the home. But both Dad and Teresa had their own families. Mom often worked at the same company as Dad, and on Dad's days off, Eric usually had a similar schedule, so they needed a place to meet in secret. Surprisingly, they chose our home. Adam and I have a hobby of taking short trips and staying at nearby hotels during long weekends, which inadvertently gave them the opportunity. Teresa would say, "It's not safe to leave the house empty for too long, so I'll check on it," as a way to confirm our absence. Then she would contact Dad. Since we were neighbors and often shared our plans without suspicion, our house became their secret meeting place. We never gave them a spare key, thinking it was impossible for them to enter. But it seems they secretly took a key during one of the dinner parties and made a copy. They were careful to leave no trace of their presence in our house. They brought their own food, took all the trash with them, collected any hair from the drain after using the bathroom, and wiped down any moisture before leaving. This time, Dad contacted Teresa after hearing that I was going back to my parents' house because of Adam's business trip. I had only informed Mom about the change in plans, leading to this unexpected encounter. If we hadn't discovered it now, who knows how long we would have been deceived. Naturally, both Dad and Teresa were served with divorce papers by their spouses. They faced claims for compensation during the divorce proceedings and were disowned by Adam and me. Although Dad and Teresa initially admitted to what they had done, they later claimed we were lying and had no evidence. However, I had recorded everything on my phone, and when I presented that as evidence, the divorce proceedings went smoothly. With the settlement money, we moved into a new apartment. Adam, who already had a bit of a germophobia, developed a complete aversion to the room after that day, and now refuses to even go near it. I also found it too painful to keep living in a house that had been used for their affair, so I fully agreed to move. Now, Mom, who has lost all love for Dad, lives with us after the divorce was finalized. Teresa, on the other hand, seemed quite pleased with herself. She became openly defiant, maybe influenced by Dad, and accepted the divorce settlement and compensation without much resistance. She moved in with Dad right after the divorce, and they got married, finally getting what they wanted, being together. It seemed like everything was going perfectly for them, with Teresa becoming the wife of a company president and looking forward to a great life ahead. However, their plans quickly went wrong. Dad's new business venture failed, and the company's performance rapidly declined, like a balloon losing air. When Mom heard about this, she simply nodded as if to say it was expected. "Who do you think was holding everything together all this time?" she said. It was Mom who had been quietly managing the complaints about Dad's harsh business tactics, both inside and outside the company, and supporting the business behind the scenes. She handled a major part of the company's finances and dealt with clients. Naturally, she resigned from the company when the divorce happened, and Dad, eager to get rid of her, didn't ensure a proper handover. As a result, the company was left with unhappy employees, and many of them followed Mom's lead and resigned, causing a staffing shortage. Dad had always believed that it was a wife's duty to support her husband, so he naturally expected Teresa to take over Mom's role. However, Teresa, who had always been a housewife, didn't understand the business at all and was of no help. The mass resignation of employees, fueled by the scandal of Dad's divorce, became widespread gossip, and clients began to pull out from Dad's company, citing poor performance. Dad's company couldn't last even half a year and soon went bankrupt. Their house and assets were seized, and they were left with significant debt, including unpaid wages. They managed to find a place in a cheap apartment, living a difficult life. Despite his age and wanting a company that would treat him as a president, Dad couldn't secure a new job. Naturally, his frustration grew, and he turned to gambling as a way to relieve his stress. But even that wasn't enough. He began to blame Teresa, saying none of this would have happened if it weren't for the affair. "It was Teresa who seduced me." His anger led to him becoming violent towards Teresa. Teresa, struggling to make ends meet with part-time jobs and desperately trying to support Dad, grew disillusioned with him. As their situation worsened, he sank deeper into his gambling addiction, wasting even the money they needed for living expenses. Unable to bear Dad's constant verbal abuse, Teresa eventually fled the apartment. She ended up at Eric's house, where Adam had grown up. Adam and I happened to be visiting Eric, who had become somewhat reclusive due to the emotional strain of the divorce. So, we often checked in on him. When we found the front door open, we walked in to see who was there and were met by Teresa. At first, we didn't recognize her. She looked so different that we thought an old woman we didn't know was speaking to us. The once well-groomed Teresa was unrecognizable now, looking worn out. Teresa tried to apologize and seek forgiveness for what she had done in the past, but all I could do was give her a bitter look, thinking it was too convenient for her to ask for forgiveness now. Eric must have been quite shocked to see her, yet he seemed somewhat moved by the return of the woman he once loved. While he was trying to figure out how to ask her to leave, Adam, standing next to him, suddenly clutched his mouth and crouched down. Remembering Teresa's affair in our room, he couldn't hold it in and vomited right there. In a panic, Eric and I rushed to get a trash can and water, and we heard Adam's cries of rejection toward Teresa from behind his back. Feeling sorry for Adam and unsure how to handle the situation, it was Eric who took action. He looked Teresa straight in the eyes and firmly told her, "There is no chance of reconciliation. Leave," he said, sending Teresa away with strong words. Teresa seemed deeply affected by her own son's rejection, especially seeing how sick it made him. Without saying another word, she stumbled out the front door and left. Since that incident, Teresa has kept her distance from Eric, and there has been no contact from either Dad or Teresa. It seems our ties with them have been completely severed. Adam was under the weather for a few days, but he has since recovered, and together we are focused on building a warm and loving home. Mom has shown incredible strength. She quickly found work, made new friends, and is moving on from Dad to enjoy her life. She's planning to rent an apartment for herself once she has saved enough, and I hope she chooses one close to her home. As for Eric, he seems to have brightened up a bit after adopting a stray cat that wandered into his yard. Taking in that one cat has led to 2 more cats gathering at his place, and now it's known in the neighborhood as a popular hangout for cats. The ordeal caused by Dad and Teresa involved the whole family in a tough situation, but those of us who remain have strengthened our bonds and are doing our best to move forward.